Hi, Julie. This is your dad. It's December 30th, 1989, nearing the end, one day away from the end of the 1980s. You had requested that your mother that I give you some information about Panama and Romania and some of the things that have been going on in the world. And I thought if I ever tried to write those things out, you know the way I am with writing, it'd probably take me a year. Because I can't be satisfied when I write things out longhand. It's just too slow. So I thought I'd send you a tape, wishing you a happy new year. By the time you receive it, you'll be in the next decade, so in a sense this is bridging 2 decades. Your mother and I were both extremely pleased about the letter we just received from you, which explains some of your current thinking about your place in life. I have to say, I fully agree with it. I think you are a completely independent adult now. Not speaking financially, of course, but in every other way, you are an independent adult with your own destiny in your own hands. But having said all that, you're always still my little girl, too. I thought the analogy to the horse was particularly good. It's an animal that I'm sure can be quite frightening at times, and at the same time offer a measure or a symbol of independence. And I guess using the same analogy and looking at what's happening in Eastern Europe, there's probably a lot of wild horses there that are being made available to new governments that are coming along, but I'll get into that later. Just one more comment about your letter. As I cut through it all, I finally realized after reading your letter what you really were saying, and I think that you really want to go to Lost River with us next summer so that you can go horseback riding. So that's my major interpretation of the letter. Needless to say, it made your mother and me feel quite proud. Moving on to the world events that you were asking about, Panama and Romania. Let me mention Panama first because I think it's an isolated incident in history and will barely make a blip in history anymore. Not much more probably than Grenada did. Whereas the Eastern European activity, I think, has tremendous potential for historic significance. But dealing first with Panama, I think it's probably a tragic occurrence overall, but I think Americans generally feel that as things were, it was probably a necessary action. Although, as you may realize, probably the rest of the world condemns the activity, or at least a lot of it, except for our Western allies. The situation probably could have been dealt with differently if we had started some time ago and maybe been prepared to give better support to the military coup. But it had just reached a point where all avenues of securing Panama were closed for the lifetime of Noriega, it appeared. And so we had a situation where Noriega, a known drug dealer, and was thumbing his nose at the United States, and at the same time was threatening the canal and the treaty, and more importantly, threatening and starting to abuse American citizens there. The official legal reasons that Bush used for the invasion were to protect our rights under the Panama Canal Treaty, and also to protect the canal, and to, most importantly, protect American lives, but also to remove Noriega from power. As the fighting developed and there was loss of American life as well as substantial loss of Panamanian life, I think you hear the parents of the soldiers that were killed seeming to hang on one justification more than any other, and that's one that they can understand, and that is that Noriega, as a drug dealer, was engaged in operations that was poisoning the minds and taking lives of American youth through drug operations. That, I'm sure, provides a lot of solace and emotional justification for it, but it probably isn't of any substantial significance as far as the drug war goes. Noriega's little activities really didn't have, the removal of them won't even be noticed as far as the drug war goes. I think most of the American people support it fully. The Panamanians seem to support it, and it seems to be going well and achieving all of its objectives. There's probably more loss of Panamanian life than there should have been, and there'll be a lot of recriminations about that later, I'm sure. But as you look at the whole thing, I say it's not really, I don't think, of historic significance, and it was a unique situation. It clearly doesn't represent an American expansionist theory. It doesn't mean that we're going to use gunboat diplomacy everywhere. It doesn't mean that we're going to colonize Panama or any other country. Panama was really a unique situation because of our past relationships with it. We had the treaties, and we had the rights for Americans to be there, and the rights under the treaties to use force if necessary to protect the Americans and to protect the canal. We also, I think, as far as public opinion goes and our own moral justifications, can take solace from the fact that the Panamanians earlier in the year had a, quote, free election, and although the results were suppressed by the Noriega government, the exit polling clearly indicated that the Panamanian people wanted other leadership and wanted Noriega out. So as a result of the invasion, we have installed those people who were elected. So we do have a sense that we are working at the request of and in the interest of the majority of the Panamanian people. But all of those factors make Panama a rather unique situation that we'll eventually withdraw from there, and that will be a chapter in history that will become obscure, I think. Eastern Europe, on the other hand, is of major significance within this century, and perhaps even in a greater sense. I'll try to give you my personal views of it, and I'll give you I'll make statements that really are pretty simple sometimes as far as reasoning goes, and I don't apologize for that. I think that you have to, when you're trying to put something in a very broad, long-term perspective, I think you have to deal in pretty simplistic concepts, because in the long run, it's the basic, simple things that do make the difference in history. Although any particular historic event may be shrouded in a lot of complex issues and complex items, I think to get the proper perspective, you need to probably put it in its simplest terms. So I don't mean to insult your intelligence by some of the background statements I might make about communism, etc. First of all, what has happened in Eastern Europe? I know you say you haven't had an opportunity to see much about it, read much about it because of press strikes and different things. But in a sense, you might even have a different perspective if you were reading the European press on the subject matter. My thinking, of course, is clouded by the
typical American reporting of the situations. And we're still pretty close in time to to what's developing there, so it's hard. That does two things for us. I think it's hard for us to know in truth or in fact how things are developing. I think the test of time will give more veracity to what we see going on now. But secondly, when we start putting things in historic perspective, we tend to look at the current events as being something that's very important in shaping history. And we have to be careful that just because something is happening these last 3 months here, and it's fresh on our minds, that we don't attach too much significance in the history of man to it. But I have to say, even tempering my thinking on all that, I think what's happening here is truly historically significant. Factually, what's happened is that starting with Poland, as you know, when was it, August or September, after several years of labor strikes and various types of demonstrations, did hold elections and had broken the power of the Communist Party in Poland. And the Lech Walesa forces have, the non-communist forces have gained a plurality control of the country. That and other factors triggered a sort of a domino effect. Of course, supported by the fact that Gorbachev says that the Russians would not interfere and would let Eastern Europeans work their own things out, their own problems out. What followed was a domino falling of virtually all of the Warsaw Pact countries. From Poland, it was followed by Hungary, in a peaceful revolution. East Germany, as you followed that, there were initially attempted thoughts of repression by Hanukkah and some of his henchmen, but and there may have been some bad incidents initially, but that resolved itself quite rapidly and quite favorably, leading up to the decision to tear down the Berlin Wall, which you may recall was made the day we arrived in Paris to visit with you, and you had the privilege of telling us about. Czechoslovakia had in years past, in the late 60s, tried for independence. The Spring Prague, Alexander Dubček tried to lead a breaking away from Russian communism at that time, and but that was brutally suppressed, and since that time has been under great wraps. But then, at this time in history, the Czechoslovakian people rose up again and have taken charge of their own lives in a peaceful demonstration and peacefully getting a hold of the government. Romania was always thought to be probably the most repressive of societies, and as it turns out, it was. I think many Americans, as we read the aftermath of the fall of the Romanian Communist Party there, are shocked at really how repressed that society appears to have been. And as you know, the upheaval, the revolution there, took on major proportions in terms of violence and death. Although I'm sure the numbers that we're hearing of 12,000 dead in Timisoara are greatly exaggerated. When the dust clears on that, we'll probably find it's a much lower number. But still, there was a lot of death, a lot of killing, primarily because not only did Ceausescu rule as a tyrant, he had a private police force, secret police, that was larger than the army. and they were armed and could act at will. And so when as the people rose up, the army, the basic army, not the secret police, at least from the junior officers on down, moved in on the side of the people. And there were a few tense days while they were holding headquarters in the television station, appealing to the people and defending their position there. But after that, they moved rather swiftly, and some would say too swiftly, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the cause appeared to be lost. Ceausescu and his wife, Elena, were captured. They were tried on Christmas Day and executed, as you know. Ceausescu's brother apparently committed suicide in a foreign embassy. And the secret police there's still probably large numbers of them out with weapons, but they seem to be falling in line now. They don't seem to have a measured or planned retaliatory force going, although there's still going to be a lot of bloodshed cleaning up that situation. I had mentioned that some say it might be too swiftly that things happened in Romania. I have to say I'm a little suspicious about that too. The question is whether it was truly a revolution of the people or whether it was a coup d'état of some military personnel. If you look at what happened, how quickly the army turned around and seemed to be in an organized support of the people, followed by the very swift removal, capture, and execution of Ceausescu, and then followed the next day by distribution of a very organized, apparently, distribution of large supplies of fruits and vegetables and other foodstuffs. It shows a revolution that has a sense of organization about it that most revolutions don't seem to have. So I guess there's still some suspicion and some concern that we don't really know at this time all of the forces that were in play in that revolution, or coup d'etat, and we're not sure which it was, I guess. So that will still have to play out over time, but in any event, I think the trend, it's all part of the same trend of the demise of communism and totalitarianism in our world, which I guess brings me to to why this has happened. But let me mention one other thing too. The countries I've mentioned were all the Warsaw Pact countries, which were ruled internally, but with direct influence from and support by the Russian military. But also within Russia, the actual Russian states, part of the USSR, the Balkan states, are also now trying to denounce communism as a monopoly political power. Lithuania has taken that position in their parliament. They've voted to end the monopoly of the Communist Party and domination from Russia in their politics. Latvia, another Balkan state, is also, I believe, in the last couple of days, has also followed suit. Probably Estonia, the other Balkan state, will also do something like that. Now, this represents probably more of a threat to Gorbachev and Russia than the fall of the Eastern Bloc countries. And it's something that has to be dealt with, and the Russians are going to have to deal with it. And I guess it's one thing for them to let the Warsaw Pact countries determine their own destiny, but it's another thing when their own member states start rejecting the Communist Party as the power party in the country. And I don't know how that's going to be resolved. I would hope peacefully, and I would hope it would leave Gorbachev still in power, but he's really caught between a rock and a hard place now on that issue. The Russians don't want to use force, they say, but at the same time there's a very independent spirit, strong independent nationalistic spirit among the Latvians and Lithuanians that somehow has to be dealt with. Okay, looking at why is all this happening, and some historic perspective on it. I guess really what it is saying is that two features of the politics of the countries that are involved, Russia and the Eastern Bloc countries, are that through the years they've been totalitarian rule and also a communist economic philosophy and practice. And what has happened through this experimental period, starting with the Russian Revolution back in 1917 for Russia itself, and then more recently after World War I with the Eastern European countries, the experiment with communism as an economic concept, and by that I mean that where the bureaucracy and the people in control feel that they can plan an economy and decide who produces what and when it's produced and actually direct economic activity, that is a concept in this experiment that's lasted most of a century, has failed. It's failed totally and miserably almost everywhere it's been tried now. It's bankrupt as an idea that man or a group of men can have the intelligence or the foresight or the ability to actually control and they're just not smart enough to really control all the flow of assets into production and to actually direct how an economy should run. That the world history in this century is telling us that the only way that works is through some sort of free market system where prices and production are set under theories of supply and demand, and that when you try to dictate it as opposed to letting the forces of supply and demand decide what is made and how it's produced and how wealth is distributed, when you try to do it the communist way, it's doomed to failure. So as an economic concept, as a way of life, that aspect of communism is clearly recognized now throughout the world, with the exception of China and maybe Cuba, as a bankrupt concept. The other aspect of these societies is the totalitarian one, and that is that the people really aren't smart enough to know what they want or to manage their own lives, and so therefore an individual or a group of individuals or a party, such as the Communist Party, must control things and must make all decisions, and as part of that must have the authority to direct people's lives to carry out their decisions. That form of totalitarianism is also now, I think, recognized worldwide, again with the possible exception of China and Cuba, as a bankrupt concept. And if you look at it in terms of the discussion we had before you left about Fukuyama's theories of history, the end of history, you may recall we had those discussions. I'm not saying I ascribe to the concepts of this is the end of history, but I think I would agree that throughout the world the whole idea of communism as an economic concept and totalitarianism as a political mechanism is recognized as invalid, and that there will be fewer and fewer experiments with it, and in the long run, a democratic, liberal, free enterprise, entrepreneurial concept will be the surviving concept throughout all countries of the world, and will provide a basis for the future activity of the world, and to a large extent will eliminate major conflicts. There are some exceptions to that, which I guess I'll get to in a minute, but I was talking basically about the causes of this quick collapse. So I think historically that was the stage for this. How it came about, I think probably we have to give a lot of credit to Gorbachev as an individual, and I guess there's some theories that say that Gorbachev is really part and acting out, or is part of a KGB plan, which it's not in a sinister sense, but there's a theory that the KGB, which is the secret police and the protector of the doctrine in the Russian government, had their economists years ago and then they had a lot of the brightest people in their organizations, and their economists recognized that the Russian system wasn't working, it wasn't going to work, and that dramatic change was necessary, and that as part of that they devised a plan to slowly move power to people who could lead those changes, starting with Andropov, although Andropov had a short-lived reign. But then Andropov's protege, Gorbachev, was really the banner leader for that, and that a lot of Gorbachev's support is from the KGB, and it's part of their plan to really save Russia, recognizing that not only is their economic theories of operation bankrupt, but that also the tremendous burden of the Cold War, the money that's being spent on defense and within Russia just places such an additional heavy burden on the country that it's doomed to revolution and anarchy if it's not managed better. So I think Gorbachev, either with or without, I don't know the extent to which he's leading the KGB or the KGB are leading him, but in any event, he's truly a remarkable person, and in a very short time has opened up the Russian society to the beginnings of a democracy by providing the people with information and making a more open society. And then on the economic theories, he's done much to break up the central bureaucracy and to push decision-making down to the lower levels, and letting market forces more and more interplay in the economic dynamics of Russia. But as part of that, they had to rid themselves of the burden of the Cold War, the financial burden, and doing that, they also had to recognize that they couldn't support the Warsaw Pact countries, particularly some of them were run by local tyrants such as Ceausescu, and that Russia just wasn't prepared to support that anymore, and was willing to let and needed to let those countries self-determine. So they